Welcome back to Database Internals Crashcasts. I'm Sheila, and I'm here with Victor to dive deeper into the fascinating world of databases. Before we begin, I'd like to remind our listeners that if you're enjoying our show, please take a moment to rate us on your preferred podcast platform. Your support means the world to us.
That's right, Sheila. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more database enthusiasts like you. Now let's get started with today's topic, the history and evolution of databases. This is the second episode in our What is a Database chapter, part of our Introduction to Databases season.
Absolutely, Victor. And to kick things off, I have a quiz question for our listeners. Are you ready?
I'm always ready for a good database quiz, Sheila. Let's hear it.
All right, here's the question. What was the name of the first commercially available database management system, and in what year was it released?
Oh, that's an interesting one. It really takes us back to the early days of database systems. I think this question is great because it highlights just how young the field of database management systems really is. Listeners, as you ponder this question, think about how much technology has changed since then. We're not giving away the answer yet, but I bet many of you will be surprised by how recent it actually is.
Excellent point, Victor. Now, before we dive into the history, let's quickly define some key terms for our listeners. Victor, could you explain what we mean by Database Management System, or DBMS?
Certainly, Sheila. A database management system, or DBMS, is software that allows users to define, create, maintain, and control access to a database. It's essentially the interface between the database and the users or applications that need to access the data.
Thanks, Victor. Now, let's start our journey through database history. Can you tell us about the earliest forms of data storage?
Of course, before digital computers, data was primarily stored on paper. Businesses used ledgers, filing cabinets, and card catalogs to keep track of information. As computers emerged, we saw the first transition to digital storage, with punch cards and magnetic tapes in the 1950s and early 1960s.
Fascinating. So how did we move from these physical storage methods to digital databases?
Great question, Sheila. The transition began in the mid-1960s with the advent of hard disk drives. This technology allowed for direct access to data, rather than the sequential access required by tape systems. This led to the development of early database systems, which were essentially file systems with added features for data retrieval.
I see. So, if I understand correctly, these early systems were a big improvement, but they still had limitations, right?
Exactly, Sheila. These early systems, known as hierarchical and network databases, were a significant step forward, but they had rigid structures that made certain types of queries and data relationships difficult to manage.
That makes sense. So, what was the next big breakthrough?
The next major revolution came in 1970 with Edgar Codd's paper on the relational model. This introduced the concept of representing data in tables with rows and columns, which we now know as the relational database model.
Oh, I've heard of relational databases. They're still widely used today, aren't they?
Absolutely. The relational model was a game changer. It allowed for much more flexible querying and data relationships. In fact, it led to the development of SQL, structured query language, in the mid-1970s, which is still the standard language for relational databases today.
That's incredible. It's amazing how something developed over 50 years ago is still so relevant. Victor, could you share an interesting anecdote about this period in database history?
Sure thing. One fascinating story is about IBM's System R project, which was one of the first implementations of SQL. The team working on it was in a race against another IBM project called IMS. The System R team was so dedicated that they named the conference room where they worked the Hummingbird Room, because they were always humming with activity, often working late into the night.
That's a great story. Now, to help our listeners visualize this evolution, could you provide an analogy?
Certainly. Think of database evolution like the evolution of transportation. We started with walking, manual record keeping, then horses, punch cards, then trains, early digital systems. The relational model was like the invention of the car. It revolutionized everything. And now, with modern databases, we're in the age of airplanes and spaceships.
That's a brilliant analogy, Victor. So, what came after relational databases?
Well, as technology continued to advance, we saw the rise of object-oriented databases in the 1980s and 1990s. These were designed to work well with object-oriented programming languages. Then, in the 2000s, we saw the emergence of NoSQL databases, which were developed to handle the massive amounts of unstructured data generated by web applications and big data systems.
Wow, databases have come a long way. Before we wrap up, could you highlight some common misunderstandings about database history?
Certainly. One common misconception is that relational databases have been completely replaced by newer technologies. In reality, relational databases are still widely used and continue to evolve. Another is that NoSQL means no SQL, when it actually stands for not only SQL, indicating that these databases can use SQL-like query languages.
Those are great points, Victor. Now I think it's time to reveal the answer to our quiz question. What was the first commercially available DBMS?
The answer is IBM's Information Management System, IMS, which was released in 1968. It was originally developed for NASA's Apollo program and later commercialized. It's a hierarchical database system that's still in use in some places today.
That's incredible. To wrap up, let's summarize the key points of our discussion on the history and evolution of databases. 1. We started with manual record-keeping and punch cards. 2. Early digital systems used hierarchical and network models. 3. The relational model, introduced in 1970, revolutionized databases. 4. SQL became the standard language for relational databases. 5. Object-oriented databases emerged to complement OOP languages. 6. NoSQL databases were developed to handle big data and unstructured data. 7. Despite new technologies, relational databases remain widely used and relevant. Victor, any final thoughts?
Just that the history of databases is a testament to human ingenuity and our ever-growing need to store, organize, and retrieve information efficiently. It's exciting to think about what the future might hold.
Absolutely. And on that note, we'd love to hear from our listeners. If you enjoyed this episode, please visit crashcasts.com and join our Discord community. Your support on Patreon helps us keep producing high-quality content. Don't forget to subscribe and rate our podcast. It really helps us reach more database enthusiasts like you. Until next time, keep querying.